A black U.S. airman is killed in his own home. Oh my God. I'm so tired, family, of having to share these types of stories because they happen way more often than they should. It's not the first or the second or the third time where I feel like we have reported a story like this in my recent years in news, and I've been in news for 20 years, but I'm talking about recent news. Um, and this one is no less disturbing than all the other ones that we've heard. The Okaloosa County Sheriff's this is very frustrating to me for a few reasons. But let's talk about it. All right. Body camera video shows a Florida deputy fatally shot a U.S. airman in his own apartment. The Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office released body cam footage capturing the moment that a deputy shot and killed a black senior airman in his apartment. 23-year-old Roger Fortson was at his off-base apartment in the crib by himself when he heard a knock on the door. Now, he didn't expect anybody. He wasn't expecting company. So he asked who it was. Nobody responds. Now, he's a military man. He's cautious of dangers. He has no idea what's going on, but something doesn't seem right to him. So he went to look in the peephole. He looks in the peephole. He can't see anybody. So imagine you're in your crib. You hear not just a knock, by the way, an aggressive knock at the door. This wasn't like a, "Yeah, pizza." This was a hard knock on the door. And after the hard knock, he asks who it is. No one responds. He then goes to the peephole. He looks in the peephole. Nobody is there. So now he's like, I don't know if there's a prank. I don't know if this is an intruder. I don't know if I'm getting set up for something. I mean, all the possibilities are endless. I'm not saying what was in his mind. I can't tell you what was in his mind, but I can tell you how most people would respond or react to this type of thing. So he goes and retrieves his gun. Now, again, he's a upstanding citizen, as they say. He has a legally registered weapon, and he goes to get it because he's concerned. He's a little afraid for his safety. Uh, as he's getting his gun, there are more knocks on the door, and knocks are getting more aggressive. So he's trying to figure out what's happening. Before he can do anything else, police bust through his door. They just bust in the door, and they see him holding his gun. His name again is Roger Fortson. Roger Fortson is now standing there, holding his gun by his side. He doesn't raise the gun. He's not pointing it at police, but he has the gun in his hand again because people were banging on his door and hiding away from the people. Well, the police see a black guy with a gun, and they shoot him 6 times. They're screaming at him to, lose the weapon or, give up the gun. He's like, I don't have it. It's over there. This is after they shot him. And he dies. 23-year-old Roger Fortson dies. Now, according to Benjamin Crump, the family attorney, who you all probably know, Mr. Fortson was on FaceTime with his girlfriend during the entire incident. And we all have those moments. You're talking to a friend or a loved one or a significant other, and you're on the FaceTime, and the police pull you over. You're like, yo, stay right here. I want you to watch or hear this. Or, yo, we talking. It's like, yo, somebody's at my door. So, someone crazy. I'm getting my gun. Yo, it's like, well, stay here with me. His girlfriend's on the phone with him. She has to see part of and hear all of her boyfriend's death sequence. Now, of course, I can't imagine what she's going through. I can't imagine what she's dealing with. But according to her, she says she believes that the deputy entered the wrong apartment. They were looking for one person, and they got somebody else. Now, for their, I don't want to say credit, but from their perspective, the sheriff's office said they didn't have the wrong apartment. They said they were in the right place. Now, it's interesting. They say they're investigating. The deputy who shot him, we don't know the deputy's name, by the way. We don't know the deputy's name. Police go to great lengths to protect officers who kill people, whether they're innocent, whether they're guilty, whether they're right, whether they're wrong. I can't speak to. But what I know for sure is, regardless of who they are or how they are, police make sure, I mean, they make sure that that name ain't leaked until the absolute last second possible. So they put the guy on administrative leave. That means he's paid. And I'm not saying he shouldn't be paid. You know, as a union person, I don't want to create a precedent where people don't get paid when they're on leave, disciplinary leave, or when they're being investigated, because that could hurt a whole lot of people, not just police. Now, the Okaloosa County Sheriff, Eric Aden, said the shooting is being investigated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and the state attorney's office. This is important because normally when police get involved in shootings, police investigate themselves. Internal affairs from the police department investigates. The superior officer, the ranking officer, the officer on call will be involved in the early investigation, and then the higher ups in that department or in that district or in that precinct will be involved in the longer term investigation. But the problem is, police investigating themselves is pointless. I've been part of one of those investigations when I sued the police department. What they do is they ask me my statement, what happened? And I say, Officer Smith did X, Y, and Z. Then they take my statement with all the details. Then they bring it to Officer Smith. They let Officer Smith read my statement and then respond to what I said. So if I say, Officer Smith called me a nigger and hit me with a brick, right? He'll read that and go, now he's not writing a formal response to my statement. He just gets to read my statement. And then they'll say, Officer Smith, what happened? He'll say, well, you know, I was walking down the street. I saw Marc Lamont Hill and I heard someone yell the N-word. I turned around. It was some random person behind me. And then I saw Marc Lamont Hill pick up a Death Star. And so I pulled up, and I didn't want to shoot him. So I picked up a brick to protect myself from the Death Star. Like, that's how it goes, right? It's a very police-centered, police accommodating process. That's just the reality of it. So the fact that it's being handled by an outside agency is very, very important. And the county sheriff said, these investigations take time. We're going to give transparency and accountability. He promised transparency and accountability. He said, but these investigations take time. But I want to assure you that we are not hiding, covering up, or taking any action that would result in a rushed judgment of Mr. Fortson or our deputy. I don't know if it's telling the truth or not, but that's the right response, right? We're going to investigate this thing and we're going to tell the truth about it. I'm good with that. Now, but here's what's funky. Here's what's funky about this. They have body camera footage. They have surveillance technologies that allow us to see what happened. The police show up at this apartment complex, which is Mr. Fortson's apartment complex. And the police get taken to an elevator by a random witness. I don't know who the witness is. They haven't said who the witness is. But imagine this. Witness takes the police to the elevator and says, hey, I'm hearing fighting from an apartment. The witness, I don't know what apartment the witness said. I don't know if the witness mentioned Roger Fortson's apartment, or if he mentioned another apartment, if he said something was going on. But remember, Mr. Fortson is in the house alone. The only person he's talking to is on FaceTime. He's talking to his girl on FaceTime. And they're clearly not having an argument. So whatever noise or disturbance they heard in that building wasn't coming from him. It just doesn't make sense. And so the deputy then approaches the front door, knocks, and twice says, sheriff's office. Now, it's clear if you're hiding behind the keyhole and Mr. Fortson doesn't hear you, just hears the knocking, the aggressive knocking, etc. It says Fortson was seen holding a gun in his right hand as he opened the door. The deputy then fired multiple shots as soon as the door opened, telling him afterwards to drop the weapon. And again, like I told you before, he said, it's over there. I don't have it. So is this just a mistake? Is this just a coincidence? I know some of you are watching this and you're thinking, well, if I were a police officer and I showed up to the crib and somebody opened the door with a gun, I'd fire first, I'd squeeze first, ask questions last too. Here's my response to you. That's why you shouldn't be a police officer. Police officers aren't supposed to do what we do. They're supposed to do what trained police officers do. And a trained police officer, a trained police officer, a trained police officer has to have a better strategy than walking up to a random house, which they clearly misidentified. Because again, either the witness gave them bad information or the police went to the wrong door. One of those got to be true. And he knocks on the door, and then suddenly you had a gang of police that were just going to bust into somebody's crib because they heard a disturbance. Even if there was an argument, if me and my cousin are in the crib arguing and we're having a shouting match, the police don't bust into the crib with guns drawn. And clearly the police had guns drawn because Mr. Fortson had his gun by his side. And when he opened the door, the police immediately started shooting. That means the police showed up to that house with guns drawn. Why would the police be showing up to this U.S. Airman's house with guns drawn? This feels like something far simpler. The police went to the wrong house. They thought they were breaking up something crazy. They went to the wrong house. They saw a Negro with a gun and they lost their minds. The other thing I want to say about this, though, the response to this shooting, like Botham Jean and others who've been killed in their own homes, or even people like Henry Louis Gates, professor at Harvard, who was arrested walking into his own home. Allegedly, they thought he was breaking into his own crib. The response is going to be that this guy was special. In fact, in a press conference, Benjamin Crump, my dear friend and brother, says about Mr. Fortson, he was a patriot. He was a U.S. Airman, special ops. He was fighting for our way of life. He was fighting for everybody. Now, Benjamin Crump is an attorney, not a political analyst or activist. He's a brilliant attorney who loves Black people, who loves oppressed people, who is fighting for the liberation of everybody. Shout out to Ben Crump. This is not a criticism of Benjamin Crump per se. I don't agree with, he was fighting for our way of life. He was, the military. I mean, the military does defend the American way of life, but that's imperialism. But that's not where I'm going with this. I just don't want to reinforce that narrative. We're not, or let it go unchallenged. My point is, yes, he was a patriot. Yes, he was a U.S. Airman Special Ops. Yes, if the police knew that, they wouldn't have shot him. Yes, we can construct a super deep stars and stripes American romanticism. We can create a whole romantic narrative around him easily, effortlessly, in fact. Not a problem at all. But I think it does us a greater disservice. It'll help us advance this story. And there is a way that when we show a Black person who played by the rules, a Black person who got fancy degree. I remember when Mike Brown was killed. I remember when Mike Brown was killed and people were saying he was starting college on Monday. Now, I'm not sure Mike Brown was starting college on Monday based on my research. But what I know is even if Mike Brown had been starting college on Monday, that doesn't make his life more or less valuable. When we show Trayvon Martin on a horse, the fact that he was on a horse doesn't make George Zimmerman's killing of him any more or less despicable. I don't want to reinforce the narrative that vulnerable people, that Black people, poor people, trans people, women, anybody who's vulnerable within a particular context only deserves our grief and our emotional investments and our political defense if they are the right kind of victim. Now, this guy, of course, the media loves great narratives, right? The media loves to spin a story. So, yeah, of course, a U.S. airman getting killed is easier to sell than a Blood or a Crip, a gang member getting killed by police in the same situation. But if we embrace that narrative too firmly, if we normalize that narrative too much, then we reinforce the idea that some people are disposable and other people are not. And that is that's something that we can't reinforce. So yes, I'm shouting out this story. I am going to tell the truth about this story, and I'm going to fight for justice. I'm going to help fight for justice for this young man, 23 years old. I have children that age. You know, Roger Fortson deserves all of that. But Roger Fortson would deserve it even if he dropped out of high school, even if he were a drug addict, even if he were unhoused, even if it was his trans boyfriend or girlfriend or non-binary friend on the FaceTime instead of a socially legible black girl or white girl, whatever she was. We can't have picks out here. We got to fight for everybody, including the most vulnerable. So for those of you who are going to advance the story as media people, or those of you who are going to advance the story as activists, it's okay to use it because it creates a spectacle for the public consumption, right? The world is going to look at this and go, "Oh my God, what just happened?" Because they have to reckon with this story. They have to find a way to make sense of it. But please, y'all, please don't let that be the only story that we tell, and don't reinforce or allow other people to reinforce a very dangerous, very, very dangerous narrative.